What is up, you guys? Welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Mackenzie. If you're not new, thank you for coming back. So today's video, just jumping right into it, we're getting back to the basics. I've got quite a few pieces of just scrap glass in front of me because today we are going to be going over cutting glass and cutting curves, or how I cut curves using no nippers. I hate nippers. All I use is running pliers and my glass cutter. So I'm going to show you how to do that, but I also want to go over some tools. So like I said, I want to get back to the basics because I have those older videos on my channel, but now that I've been on here a little while, I kind of want to refresh them, redo them, answer more of those questions that I get commonly asked. So we're going to go over the tools, how to replace parts that need to be replaced, how do you know when to replace them, and how all of those things take into effect your ability to easily cut glass, if that makes sense. So if that sounds like something you're into, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified every single time I upload. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we actually get into cutting some glass, like I said, I want to go over all of our tools, how to take care of them, what parts on your tools can be replaced, and how do you know when you need to replace them. So first things first, let's go over our running pliers. So here is a brand new pair of running pliers. Here is my old reliable running pliers that I use all the time. I've never even touched these ones yet. So new ones we'll put to the side. Here are our old ones. Now I want to give you guys an up close look at your running plier pads because that's the most important thing. So as you can see at the top of your running pliers, not only is there a little mark in the center right here, but there are these big plastic pads. So those plastic pads are obviously to protect your glass and protect your running pliers from making direct metal on glass contact. So this is going to give quite a bit of cushion when you pinch down on your glass, and it's not just going to shatter it. But with that being said, you also need to control your running plier width. So this little screw right at the top is going to control how far apart or close together you want your running pliers to be. So I keep mine just a little bit separated. You don't want them to be all the way closed because when you go to pinch down on your glass, it's not going to have a big enough cushion before it just kind of snaps it wherever it can. I find it puts a little bit too much pressure on the glass. So I like to have about that much space, really for any size glass, but you can adjust it if you've got a really textured glass or a super thick glass. I would suggest opening up that a little bit more. So as I've mentioned before, I don't use nippers, so I kind of use these as my all-around tool. Therefore, the corners of my running pliers have a lot more wear and tear. So you can see right here in this top corner, those pads are completely worn away. That's totally open metal contact. That's no good. But good news is you can replace them. So that's exactly what we're gonna do. We wanna replace these pads. So all you're gonna need is a pair of little pliers and your replacement pads. I suggest getting replacement pads over buying a new pair of running pliers every single time, just because you don't need to. So even though these running pliers might be $15 and a couple pairs of replacement pads might be $8, it might be like, oh, I might as well just buy new running pliers. No, don't do that. That's wasteful. Just get the replacement pads. So these are really easy to use. Like I said, all we're gonna need is pliers, and I'll show you how to replace them right now. Okay, got you a little bit closer, so hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. I've got a pair of old needle nose pliers here, and all I'm gonna do is kind of pinch these old pads right off. So these are gonna be kind of nasty. They probably got a lot of glass shards in there, so throw those right in the trash. Do the same thing for the other side. Just grab a side, pinch them off. So for the most part, as long as you have the right kind of pliers, so for running pliers, you can have, I actually believe they're called key fob pliers. That's not what you want. You want to have the correct running pliers, and what I mean by that is that you have the separating screw and that your top piece of your plier is curved. So stained glass running pliers need to have a curved edge on the very top of your running pliers. That is just going to help your running pliers actually do its job. If it's just flat, it's gonna be difficult for it to push your sides of the glass open on each side of your score, if that makes sense. So here's our score. We've lined our score up with our line on our running pliers. Now when we pinch down, you want those curved edges to be pushing on either side of the glass to help snap it open. If it's just flat, it's not gonna do that. So make sure you've got curved edge running pliers. So order these ahead of time. You wanna make sure you always have an extra pair, because to be honest, sometimes you just run through them a lot quicker. Sometimes you can get away with months of using the same pair of pads, and other times you're gonna need some in 2 months. So this is what they look like. Just normal little new plastic pads. They're just like little rubbery plastic feeling pieces. So to easily put them on, I'm gonna suggest you take your needle nose pliers, stick one end in one side, so now you've got it gripped, right? Just like this. You're gonna take your running pliers, slide one edge on, and pull the other edge. It's not gonna rip. Pull it nice and hard over the top. Then you can go back to the other side and kind of push it down with your fingers. Just kind of smoosh it down. You want to make sure that's all the way down, right? So now it looks like a brand new pair of running pliers. Let's do that again. Hopefully you saw that okay. So again, taking the little pad, one side in my needle nose. I've got a nice good grip. Like I said, don't worry about it. You're not gonna rip it. Put one over the edge of your running pliers. Kind of stabilize yourself and stretch it all the way over the other side. Perfect. Nice and easy. Takes 2 seconds to replace. Now we've got brand new running pliers for half of the cost. And for half the cost, you get 2 sets. So I love replacing the pads. It's kind of fun to do. And every time you do it, like I said, it's like getting all new running pliers again. On to the next tool. So we've replaced our pads, got our nice running pliers. Let's go over glass cutters. So I am gonna suggest to you guys that you try to learn on a pistol grip. This is a pencil grip glass cutter. This is a pistol grip glass cutter. Now, the only difference between the two is how you hold it. I use a pencil grip, but again, I'm gonna suggest you use a pencil or a pistol grip, because this is gonna save your fingers, your knuckles, your wrist from a painful arthritis experience when you're older. If you look at a lot of older stained glass artists, a lot of the time their hands will kind of be permanently seized up like this, which is scary. And I wish I learned initially on a pistol grip, because now that I'm years into stained glass, it is a struggle for me to try to use a pistol grip because I've adjusted to a pencil grip. And I know I'm going to be paying the price for that when I'm much older. So when we get into actually glass cutters, there are different variations as far as glass cutting tips. So there are different sizes. Doesn't matter too much, they all do the same thing. As long as your glass cutter is scoring your glass, then it's doing its job. It doesn't matter, it's all preference. So on this particular pencil grip glass cutter, this is a 2 to 12 millimeter glass cutter. And let's say on this pistol grip, this is a 612. So I don't know from here if you can see the big difference. Let me get closer. On the top of our glass cutters, this is what cuts the glass. Of course, this little tiny wheel mixed in with some glass cutting oil is what scores it. If you don't have glass cutting oil, you've got nothing. Now, like I said, the difference between these two sizes, this is a 6 to 12 millimeter, this is a 212. So this one right here has a tiny little wheel at the top. You see that? And this one, which is the 612, has a much larger wheel up at the top. Again, there's no big difference between them all. It's all preference. It's all gonna score your glass. They're both gonna do the same thing. So again, of course, I'm gonna suggest you learn on a pistol grip, but I will definitely say, when you do not ever fill these with oil. So this right here, this little clear handle, is for the sake of the oil reservoir. So this is a hollowed out handle and you can fill this with oil, but I would never suggest doing that because that is going to leak inevitably and it's going to make a mess. So I've got my glass cutting oil in this little tiny jar right here. All you gotta do is keep this to the side as you're cutting glass, and every time you need to re-soak your tip in oil, which is not often by the way, just dip it in the top and you're not making an oily mess. So keep it in a tiny little jar to the side. It'll be a lot easier. These things, no matter what brand you get, how much money you spend, they're gonna leak, and it's annoying. It just makes a mess. You get oil everywhere and the shit never comes out of your clothes. So don't fill these with glass oil, just have a little thing to the side. So this little glass cutter, this is also a pistol grip. This one's a 212 too, so same thing. This one's a 612, this one's a 212. Bigger wheel, smaller wheel, but it does the same exact thing. Both pistol grip, don't fill them with oil. Now your pencil grips. So pencil grips are again the same thing, and you just have different size heads, but you can also get replacement heads, just like for the pistol grip. If you want to get replacement heads versus buying a whole new pencil cutter, then you can do that. A lot of the time when you buy these cheaper sets on Amazon, they'll come with 2 pencil grips and a replacement head, and most of the time it'll come with the little screwdriver, which is super cute. I like to have these handy. You know those like random decor pieces you have around your house that need a mini screwdriver and you never have a friggin' mini screwdriver? Well, if you get one of these sets, it will probably come with one. So if you want to replace the tip on either of your glass cutters, your pistol grip or your pencil grip, it's very easy. So it's a very tiny little screw, but at the very top of your cutter, whether it's the pistol or pencil, there's going to be a little tiny screw. And all you have to do is loosen that screw. Your spring pushes it out. Take your tip off, put your new tip on. Now you can tighten it to wherever you want. And I'm gonna tighten it all the way. Very easy, it takes 2 seconds to replace those. Like I said, I don't like much cushion at all. So all I've got is that little bit of push. You can let it out a little bit more if you want, but this is exactly where I'm comfortable at. It's all with what works for you. There are so many different ways to cut stained glass, score stained glass. As long as you're making your pieces with structural integrity and you're doing it the right way, it doesn't matter how you get there. You know what I mean? So I only like a little bit of cushion in mine. I've tightened it back on. We're good to go. So you can get replacement heads. You can get pencil grip, pistol grip, doesn't matter. So I think the last thing we need for cutting stained glass are these horrible, horrible things called nippers. So here is a brand new pair of nippers. Here is an old pair of nippers. They both look new because I never use either of them. I hate these things. So I guess the objective of these horrible things, which again, just common sense, metal on glass contact, these are meant to aggressively nip off chunks of glass, or when you're cutting deep curves into your glass, you can take it with your flat bottom side down. Say we cut a big curve like this, yeah? So you would pinch a piece of glass, pull down and out with these things. Now, just logically thinking for a moment, how? Just why? These are metal nippers on glass. So if you squeeze too hard, that glass is going to explode into a million pieces and fly across your house. And if you don't need to use these, then why? I don't bother. I can cut any kind of curve, deep as, I don't know, the Grand Canyon, and I don't need these things. So why do you? I don't know. This is just personal preference. I'm gonna show you guys how I personally cut curves, but these are called nippers. I figured I still gotta show you because they're out there, but I don't like them. I hate these things. They belong in the trash. You're going to need something to mark your glass with when you're cutting glass. So I always suggest a Sharpie because this is going to last a lot longer when you draw your stencil onto your glass, if you so choose to do it that way. So if you draw it onto your glass, you're gonna want something that's gonna hopefully last through the grinding process. Since it's going to get the glass wet, it's gonna rub away a little bit of that stencil. Sharpies hang on quite a bit longer than any normal marker. Then you're going to need glass cutting oil. So as you just saw, I just knocked it over. That's why I have this. So I've got a couple different kinds of glass cutting oil. To be honest with you, there's no big difference. If you wanted, you could probably just use 3-in-1 from the hardware store. It doesn't matter as long as you have some type of lubrication on your glass cutter. All right, so we've got our nippers, our running pliers, glass cutters, both pistol grip and pencil grip. We've got Sharpies, our glass cutting oil. We're ready to cut. So let me reset you guys up and we will get into actually cutting some glass and how I personally cut curves in glass. So all glass cuts differently, grinds differently, scores differently. So again, with time, this is gonna be something that you just kind of pick up on. So like this, for example, Spectrum glass is fantastic. Spectrum glass is just that beautiful, smooth, easy to cut, quick to grind glass. This is a Spectrum. So let's look at this, for example. I'm not even sure what brand this is, but as you can see, it seems almost a little bit thicker. And this is just regular cold glass, but it's also got an insane texture to it. So naturally, this is going to be not only a lot harder to grind, but a lot harder to cut. So whenever you have a super textured glass like this, you gotta find the smooth side. So obviously you don't wanna score your glass with this side facing up. You would take it, flip it over, and even though that's also a very textured glass in comparison to a regular, say, Spectrum iridescent, this is the side you wanna cut. So you gotta pay attention to brand, texture, all of those things when you're cutting your glass. And another thing is temperature. So the first time I figured this out was when I was in my old apartment and it was the middle of winter. I think it was just when I woke up and I hadn't turned on the heat yet for the day, so it was still pretty chilly in the house. And I went through probably maybe even more than a full 12 by 12 piece of glass, just breaking piece after piece after piece and just ruining a sheet and a half, and I could not figure out what was wrong. My pads were new on my running pliers, my glass cutter was new, it was the temperature. So if it's too cold than it normally is, you'll notice that your glass is definitely breaking differently. There are so many things that can affect how your glass breaks. It's not even funny. But again, this is just one of those things that's gonna come with time. So the more you practice, the more you're going to pick up on all of these things. And again, not only visually do you have that kind of representation of how things are going, but audibly too. So I can hear, I could probably tell you with my eyes closed if something broke the way that I wanted it to. So we're gonna get more into that in a second, but you've got to listen to your glass. So listening to your glass is the only reason why I can cut deep C curves with just my running pliers. If I couldn't listen to the glass, I wouldn't be able to do that. So let's get into cutting some glass. I'm gonna do a couple pieces on really textured glass and some on some smoother glass. Let's get into it. Okay, so now that we know all of those outside factors that can kind of play a role into how we're cutting our glass, we're actually ready to go. We've got our little jar of glass cutter. We've got our brand new pads on our running pliers. We've got our pencil grip glass cutter and our pistol grip glass cutter. And we've got our nippers in the trash. So I've got to the side right here a couple of my hand-drawn stencils. That's another thing I'm gonna have to probably do another video on. I'll probably do a Q&A so you guys can all throw in some questions that you're curious about. But I get questions about stencils, where do I find them? I am always going to suggest making your own stencils. You cannot just be looking at everybody's stuff on the internet and copying people's artwork. I always tell all of my customers that a piece of my soul is in every single stained glass sun catcher that I make. I put so much love, time, and energy into my work, and all of you guys should be doing the same. There are obviously big stained glass sellers or sites you can find online, free work and stuff, but I'm always going to encourage you guys to draw and make your own stencils. That helps keep us unique, and that really makes it your own art. You know what I mean? Anybody can cut a piece of glass using the same stencil from whoever online, but no one can replicate your personal style at all. So I'm always gonna suggest you guys create and really let yourself fall into the art aspect of stained glass. So that spiel over, I've got a couple of my moon or crescent moon stencils here so we can get into really cutting deep curves. And we'll do a tiny little moon. So I'm going to line it up against the edge of the glass because you obviously don't want to be wasteful. And the reason I'm leaving myself a little bit of an edge over here is because this is going to be a lot easier to break off versus if I was to push it all the way up against the edge and just leave myself that tiny little bit of space. If I give myself just a little bit more room, it's much more likely that I'm going to be able to break that end piece off with my running pliers. Hopefully that makes sense. Obviously all of this is scrap glass right here. This is all just for the sake of this video, so I'm not going to be doing anything with this stuff. All right, so we've got a little crescent moon here. Let's do a bigger pink one on this side. Now, if you guys are curious on how I make my own stencils and you haven't seen that video, I will link my stained glass playlist below. It is stained glass start to finish, and in that video, I show you guys how I make my own stencil. All right, so let's move everything else out of the way. Let's start with these two simple moons, and we'll go from there. Okay, so the reason I'm starting with these two pieces is again because this is Spectrum. This is, in my opinion, the easiest glass to cut, the easiest glass to break. So I've got two pretty decent curved crescent moons, and I've got my dustpan right here because every single time we make a break, you need to sweep up your area. If you put down a piece of glass on top of even the tiniest little glass shard, it's gonna smash. So starting with my pencil grip, because that's what I most commonly use. And I'm just going to lightly dip it. You just need a tiny bit of oil on that wheel to really cut. So hopefully you can see that better now. So we want to get rid of all that extra meat. We've got oil on our glass cutter. I'm going to go in lightly pressing, and most importantly, listening to the score that I make. You hear that? And do the same thing on the other side. Lightly pressing, listening to my glass, and meeting up with that initial score. Now I'm gonna turn it back to its side. I'm gonna stand up to make it a little bit easier. And I'm gonna cut this inner curved edge, lightly pressing. I'm using my thumb back here to help guide my glass cutter. And that's it. So now, let's move our towel. We're gonna take our nice new running pliers. And again, you're gonna listen. You've gotta listen to this. So because I don't use nippers, this is the most important part. We've gotta open up each edge so it doesn't just break off in any direction it wants. I'm gonna start where I came from. Pinch that edge open. Did you hear that? Now I'm gonna go to the other side and pinch that edge open. Listen. Now I'm gonna go back and forth. Until it opens up. So all we're doing is going back and forth on each edge, just slowly opening up that break. So now I'm going to go back and pinch off that extra meat. Now this is the part I was talking about. You see I've got a little bit of hangover. That's why I leave myself that little bit of space on the outside of the glass over here. Because now I can take my running pliers, take that edge, pinch it, and pull it off. Just like you would do with nippers, excuse me. So I can pinch that edge off. Now all we've got left is this inner deep curve. So same thing, I'm going to the inside, gonna open this edge, listen. It's open. Now let's open the other side. It's open, and go deeper in. That's it. Perfect, easy curve with no nippers. So let's go to a little bit of a bigger moon. Hopefully it'll be easier for you guys to see. Extra meat off. Let's take this top extra meat. Bottom. If you want to meet up with it just like any other. Beautiful. Now here's the scary part. We're gonna open each end. Listen to it and look for it. Ready? Did you hear that? It's open. Now listen to this side. You hear it? Now both of our edges are open. So we're just gonna go back and forth, opening it a little bit further, little bit further, little bit further. And if you want to, you can look at the back for just some visual reassurance. You can see we opened both of our edges. You can see it's cracked here already. So we know we're on the right track. We're just gonna keep opening that edge. Easy peasy. Easy, easy peasy. Now, how much easier is that than the traditional way? So I don't know if you guys are glass cutters, but the traditional way to cut out a curve would be like this. So say we want this cut out. What you would do is make tons of cuts all the way before it, pulling each of those out with friggin' nippers. No thanks. So what you would do is cut this. Let me get my nippers out of the trash. So you put your thumb up against that score, flat side of your nippers down. You're going to pinch that area you want to pull off, and in a down and outward motion, pull it out. Then you would have to repeat that all the way up. So you'd have to score it, pinch it out, score it, pinch it out, score it, pinch it out. Why bother with all that? I don't see what the point of that is when you can just take your glass cutter, listen to it, and pull it out. Pretty easy to me. I would much rather do that. It's much quicker, less stressful, and a lot easier. All right, so let's get all this scrap out of the way. Let's move on to a textured glass. All right, so here we've got a pretty textured glass here, guys. Doesn't get much more texture than this. All right, I've got a silver Sharpie here so you can see what I'm doing. And we're gonna kind of go a little bit simpler for this glass since it's super textured, and I just wanna basically show you guys how this glass breaks differently. My thumb right behind my cutter. Little bit of pressure. You hear that? This is a brand new cutter, so that is a nice, crisp scoring sound. Listen again. All right, so I just checked my running pliers. I've got my nice space in between. Same thing, we're gonna be pinching open each end, listening to our glass, and opening it up slowly. There it is. There it is. Not only did that not audibly sound as crisp as I wanted it to, we can't visually check to see if both of our ends are even open. So now I would suggest going in with the back side of your glass cutter and tapping this edge out. All right, so it worked, but as you can see, down at the bottom here, we've got that jagged edge where it's super rippled on the back side. So you can see those rippled edges kind of moving towards that cut edge. So what makes cutting such a textured glass so difficult is that it kind of has a mind of its own. So even though you score a straight line across the glass, if the ridge inside one of those deep textured areas happens to line up with your straight line forward, it almost tends to pick up with the texture, and then it kind of just breaks where it wants to. So unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, while I was filming, everything broke where I wanted it to. Just be aware that when you're cutting something with such a deep texture like this, it can sometimes have a mind of its own. Don't let that get you discouraged. Just like with everything else, you just need to practice. The more you work with different types of glass, the easier it's going to be, and the easier it will be to anticipate how the cut is going to go. Okay guys, I think that's enough information for today's video. I'm aware that this is probably going to be long enough as it is, but hopefully getting to see me cut a little bit of stained glass has helped answer some of you guys' questions as far as cutting curves into your stained glass. Nippers are where they should be, in the trash can. I think that's it for today's video, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you still have any questions or comments, leave them down below in the comment section. If you have any ideas or suggestions for upcoming videos, something that you would like to personally see, please leave that down below too. I'm going to link everything I can in today's video, so all the tools I use. I'm also going to link my stained glass work and my stained glass business, so if you want to go check that out, please do. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications bell so you get notified every single time I upload. And I will see you next time. Bye!